Moderator, I believe we can start recording again.
We are recording.
Wonderful, thank you. I believe that never stopped, huh? Okay. Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is the Board of Behavioral Sciences. My name is Max Disposti. I'm the board chair, pronounced him is. We're here in board session, public sessions. Today is Friday, September 10th, 2021, and the time after the break is 10:30 a.m. I know our agenda item was following up with item 12, Telehealth Committee updates. However, I was asked by our staff if we could jump temporarily to item 16, which is the discussion and possible recommendation regarding Assembly Bill 468 from Friedman for the emotional support animals. Because we have some guest speakers, we just wanted to make sure they don't have to wait any longer. Steve and staff, if that's confirmed, I will definitely move the agenda to item 16 for then returning to the Telehealth Committee update and Licensing Committee update thereafter.
Yes.
And thank you.
Yeah, I think, Roseanne, is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
We have two guest speakers for AB 468. One's having a little bit of technical issue joining, but hopefully he'll be able to call in to join at the end. If not, we do have one of our guest speakers on the line with us. So I'll go ahead and get started with AB 468. Again, this is item number 16. The author of this bill is Assemblymember Friedman, and the topic is emotional support animals. And the board had previously taken an opposed position on this bill. And so it is now enrolled and going to the governor. So we have a couple of the bill sponsors today that would like to talk to explain in a little more detail about the purpose behind the bill. So this bill would require a healthcare practitioner who provides documentation about an individual's need for an emotional support animal to comply with certain specific requirements. And under current state and federal laws, there's very specific definitions of service animals that must be, those services, that dog must be trained to perform services directly related to an individual's disability. A guide dog is defined specifically as a type of seeing eye dog that has very specific training. And there's also definitions of signal and service dogs. And then support animals, they don't have a common definition in law. There is, for the purpose of the California Fair Employment and Housing Act, a support animal is defined as an animal that provides emotional, cognitive, or other similar support to an individual with disabilities. And unlike the other types of actual service dogs, these are not considered service dogs, they are support animals. And so they don't need to be specifically trained or certified under that particular law. So this bill would do three different things, one of which would affect board licensees. The first two things that it does that wouldn't affect board licensees really as much as it would require a seller or provider of an emotional support dog to provide the buyer or recipient with a written notice stating that the dog does not have specific training required to qualify as a guide, signal, or service dog. And the notice must also state that knowingly and fraudulently representing that that dog does have that specific certification is a misdemeanor violation. And then it puts in basically the same requirements for someone who sells or provides like a certificate for the dog, an ID tag, vest, leash, or harness, that you can't, that does not qualify the animal as a guide, signal, or service dog, and that you need to not represent that it does, or that's a misdemeanor. So those are the first two things that the bill does. The third thing the bill does affect board licensees. First, the bill starts out by defining a healthcare practitioner, and that includes board licensees who are licensed under the Business and Professions Code. And then the bill goes on to prohibit a healthcare practitioner from providing documentation relating to an individual's need for an emotional support dog unless they comply with a certain set of criteria. Number one, they must have a valid active license and include the effective date, license number, jurisdiction, and type of license in that documentation. They must be licensed to provide the services within the scope of license in the jurisdiction where the documentation is provided, so where the client is. They must have an established client-provider relationship with the individual for at least 30 days before providing the documentation about the need for the emotional support dog. And then finally, they need to complete a clinical evaluation of the individual regarding the need for an emotional support dog. And then finally, they need to provide verbal or written notice to the individual that knowingly and representing that this is a guide, signal, or service dog is a misdemeanor violation. And that's so that the person that's receiving the animal is aware of the laws and does not know them. The bill also states that if a healthcare practitioner violates any of the provisions listed that I just listed, they might be subject to discipline by their licensing board. And then the bill states that a person knowingly or fraudulently representing, selling, or offering for sale an emotional support dog is subject to civil penalties brought by the Attorney General, a district attorney, a county council, or a city attorney. I mean, it lists the monetary amount of the violations. So the bill is intended to curtail the misrepresentation of buying and selling emotional support dogs and their identifying equipment as having equal access as trained service dogs do. There's a lot of confusion out there amongst the public on what type of dogs are permitted to do what sort of activities. So they're really seeking to clarify this so that there's not so much confusion, so that everybody understands what is and is not permitted. This is something that the board's enforcement unit sometimes receives complaints about, and it's not something where the law has been very clear in the past. So staff believes that some of the clarifications being made would be helpful because it is sort of the board can take disciplinary action in certain cases, but it's got to be fraud or gross under the unprofessional conduct code of fraud or gross misconduct or negligence, if that can be demonstrated. The amendments also clarify certain violations related to the sale and representation of an emotional support dog, subjects the violator to civil penalties by the Attorney General or a district attorney, a county council, or a city attorney. And that might be helpful to the board's enforcement unit as well, because if sometimes we receive a complaint, there's not really anything that the board can do about it. It's not under the jurisdiction. And then they say, well, what state entity can I talk to? And we don't know. There's not really any particular place to point them to. So this would allow a place to point them to as well. Both the Board of Behavioral Sciences and the Board of Psychology have a couple of case examples. A lot of mental health practitioners are known, I wouldn't say a lot, but some mental health practitioners are known to sell these letters for a fee online. Sometimes the client doesn't need to they don't even need to know the client. And so we have taken disciplinary action for things like not properly assessing the patient's mental health ahead of time, not informing patients about risks, consequences, and benefits, things like that. And there's a case example from the psychology board that I cited as well. So since the board considered this bill last on July 7th, the bill has become enrolled. So we wanted to give the board another chance to take a look at it, and the sponsors would like to address the board with a little bit deeper explanation of the meaning. Most of the amendments that were taken after the board meeting were mainly technical and replacing the word dog with animal. So we have two sponsors that would like to speak today. We have Wallace Brosman on the line, and she is the communications coordinator for Canine Companions. And then we're hoping to get Rabia Dow, who's the director of outreach and advocacy for Guide Dogs for the Blind. I know he's having a little bit of technical difficulties, so I'm going to start by turning things over to Wallace. She's going to give you a brief explanation of her organization's stance on this issue, and then we'll see if we can get Rabia on. So moderator, would you mind letting Wallace have the floor? Moderator.
Hi there. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, yes, you can. Thank
Great.
you.
As Roxanne said, my name is Wallace Brosman, and I am the Communications and Advocacy Coordinator for Canine Companions. We provide service dogs to people with disabilities outside of blindness. And she did a really good job of summarizing this bill. And I know there's been a bit of confusion and apprehension in the past because of the role of practitioners in this bill. So I wanted to start out by telling you the real meat and point of this bill and why it's something that Canine Companions, along with Guide Dogs for the Blind, has sponsored and championed up till this point. The goal is to reduce the number of untrained pets, including emotional support animals, in public areas in order to protect the access and safety of task-trained service dogs. As Roxanne briefly mentioned, an emotional support animal and a service animal are not the same thing. A service animal has been specifically trained in tasks that directly mitigate a handler's disability. So that's pulling a wheelchair, guiding, providing anxiety interruption for someone who has chronic anxiety or panic attacks. An emotional support animal's role is to be a pet that provides a therapeutic benefit by the mere nature of their presence. So these dogs are not trained, and they are generally a person seeking an emotional support animal already has that animal in their possession and is trying to gain legitimacy for purposes of housing or other ways to utilize that emotional support dog, perhaps in ways that they should not. So ADA Title III says that emotional support dogs are not service animals, as we've just established, and do not have the rights that are afforded to service animals because they don't have the training required to mitigate a disability. One thing to be sure of here is that we're not trying to limit access to a person who really requires the benefits from an emotional support animal. We just want to make sure there's not confusion around the terminology and training that someone who has been prescribed an emotional support animal is aware that there are limitations to that prescription, that the dog is not allowed in places of public accommodation. The second prong is that we do want to make sure that we are giving some teeth to those equipment and letter providers, the regulations around that, because technically what they are doing at this point is defrauding people with disabilities who believe they are required to have a vest and a tag and a letter and all this stuff, and that gives them the carte blanche to go into public, and that's not the case. So why is this important? This is important because the presence of these untrained emotional support animals and pet dogs has become a real problem for people like me who rely on task-trained service dogs for independence. I am actually on my third service dog through Canine Companions, but this is very personal to me because my second service dog, his name was Mork, as in Mork and Mindy. Mork was an excellent service dog, and he really was life-saving. However, in our 2.5 years together, he was attacked more than 10 times by dogs in public. And the end result of that was that a really excellent and life-saving best friend that I had was taken out of service. I had to make the hard decision to retire Mork because he was so hypervigilant and uncomfortable in public because he was constantly looking for the next attack that I lost my best friend and my independence. And this is not just one case. We hear about this quite frequently at Canine Companions, trying to ensure that our clients are able to utilize these exceptional dogs without risk to themselves and to the dog. So what we ask of you as the board is to understand that emotional support dogs are not service dogs, and the confusion between the two. I apologize, my service dog is digging a nest. We're not, thank you. We ask that there is an understanding that the pieces that we are requesting of the practitioners, again, are not there to try and be punitive, but to help raise awareness around the issues that come up when emotional support animals are used incorrectly, and understanding that an emotional support animal has a therapeutic benefit that is a form of treatment. That's what a practitioner is, treating something with an emotional support dog. It's not just providing it because someone asked for it. I'd really love to take some questions if you have any. I hope that cleared up why we're doing this. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Wallace. Before we take questions, I'm going to have the moderator allow Rabiha. I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I apologize sincerely if I'm not. Moderator, he is a call-in user. It's the one that starts with 4153. If you could let him have the floor now, and then we'll take questions from both parties.
I have promoted him.
Thank you. You may go ahead now. You can hear us.
You are muted. You'll have to unmute your microphone from your phone.
Moderator, is there a certain button that he needs to push to do that?
He should have a unmute button visible.
Okay.
I will send a request to unmute, see if maybe that prompts something at his end.
Okay. Well, maybe we can, while we wait to see if maybe Rabiha can unmute his phone, maybe we should start the discussion and see if the board has any questions for Wallace, and then we can circle back. Max, would you like to start the discussion?
Yes, Roseanne, thank you so much. And also, thank you for the introduction of the bill. Thank you, Brosman, right? That's how you...
Wallace Brosman. Brosman, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here today with us, and thanks for clarifying some of the process, because, I mean, as speaking as a regular citizen, I understand that the confusion is totally out there. It's very frustrating, I imagine, for a lot of people that really are in need of service dogs. And some of the service providers sometimes has confused themselves who to accommodate or not to accommodate, and the idea that people entering in spaces that could jeopardize, even or threaten the life of others that are really in need for their own livelihood is definitely devastating. So my sympathy to you, and thank you again for making the time and helping us through this, because definitely, as you know, this is an agency. We're trying to protect the consumer, but also we're trying to make sure that the licensee don't become the regulatory process or everything that's happening out there, because we need to create a balance. So, so if I understood correctly, so help me through the process. So this bill actually, number one, will help to clarify the distinguish between a service dog and an emotional dog. I think in the past conversation that we had a couple of months ago, I know there were a lot of initial conversation, and there was a bill. So I don't know if it's the same bill that was actually sponsored from the Association of Landlords or something like that. I don't know if it was in relation to this.
It's not. This is
Okay.
well.
This is different.
This bill was sponsored by Canine Companions and Guide Dogs for the Blind. The apartment association is in agreement with this bill because it does help them, but we are not creating this law in order to benefit anyone other than people with disabilities.
Totally makes sense. Thank you so much for clarifying. Also, I asked that question for the public because we had a public conversation around that, so it goes to the record. So again, so that will help to distinguish. So what you're asking is for our licensee, for instance, to make sure that when they provide those letters for emotional dogs, because we know there are a lot of people in need, like you stated, you know, I like the fact that you made it clear that this is not about us against them. It's about recognizing just the differences about the services that are provided. So pretty much the bill is asking for our licensee to make sure that when they provide those letters for emotional support, they clarify that those it's an emotional support dog, is not a dog that's been trained for years to provide proper services to different populations as a service dog. So that's pretty much what we are asking to do, right?
Yes, it's essentially what would be helpful in to everyone is clarifying that these two are different and educating the people to whom the practitioners provide these letters that yes, this is an emotional support animal. It has certain rights, but they are not permitted in places of public accommodation. And that's the big piece, because public accommodation, that means your restaurants, your movie theaters, your shopping centers and grocery stores. And that's where most of the incidents are taking place. That includes airports as well.
Right.
So it's an education piece for them as well.
Right.
Wallace,
No,
can I interrupt for a second? Sorry, this is Adia Gao. I apologize for the technical difficulties here,
sure,
but
go ahead.
I'm glad that I'm able to join you for a couple of minutes. I don't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation. I think things have been covered very well. I just want to add one other thing that has been really driving us through this process, and thank you for hearing us about that, is that this issue has become, as Wallace mentioned with her example, dangerous for the guide dog user or the service dog user, as well as the dog and the general public. You know, when somebody signs a certificate, sight unseen, without any clinical supervision or follow-up, and then you end up with someone taking a dog on a plane, putting a dog under a seat, a dog that is not used to that, not trained for that, not socialized for that. That's a scary confining space in a noisy environment, not to mention the air pressure. And that dog, out of fright, may lash out, as it has in the past, and bitten other service animals, as well as other passengers, and then one unfortunate situation in Atlanta bit the face of a staff member on the plane. It's not the fault of the dog. It may not be the fault of that dog handler, who may or may not know or had known what they were doing, but it's something that we're all responsible for, that this is not a joke. When we give somebody that permission, in a way, to take that pet to places like that, it can have serious consequences. You know, we all love our pets. All of our pets are emotional support animals for us. But we have a responsibility to that pet and to each other in public space. The other side of this equation is what Wallace mentioned. I mean, in a study that Wallace's organization ran a couple of years ago, it showed that the majority of service animal users are apprehensive about going out in public now because of confusion, public confusion over what is a legitimate service animal and frankly, the fear of going through what Wallace went through with her dog being attacked. You know, when we use service animals, we depend on them to live a full, engaging life in our community. Take our kids to school, go to work, participate in meetings like this in person, hopefully after COVID-19, you know, go to our medical appointments, so on and so forth. That robs us of that, you know, equal access to our community. And we're all much poorer for it because we all have contributions to make, valid contributions to make in our community. And that is something that we're concerned about as service animal users. And as was mentioned before by Rosalind, I believe, the majority of these fraudulent certificates are by fly-by-night kind of outfits. They change their names. But a significant number of them are being signed by folks in the emotional or psychiatric or behavioral sciences in some way or another. And we need to make sure that you know, we hold each other responsible for the consequences of what we're doing.
Thank you very much, Rabia. I very much appreciate that. And we can open it back up to this discussion and questions, Max, if you would like.
Right. No, thank you for interjecting. That was very helpful. So thank you both again for being here. Again, this is Max. I'm the board chair. Since you cannot see me over the phone, the questions I'm asking, I'm very sympathetic about this bill. So just to let you know, but I just ask about, perhaps this is a question for you, Roseanne, about the part where the bill, so how do we reinforce that? Because obviously our agency, you know, every time we enact a bill or we support a bill, we need to think about, so how the BBS is going to be able to, let's say that after the bill passed, we have licensee that actually continue to do so, right? They issue letters without any disclosures. They are not even local therapists, and all the wrong things are happening right now. So how do the BBS reinforce that? What kind of jurisdictions we have? Are these going to become applicants that perhaps end up under the BBS jurisdiction in terms for providing disclosure and documentations that are not appropriate based on the bill? So how does it work that you read that part of it? How would it, you know?
So what would happen if this became law? And I'll have Steve weigh in after me on the details of the enforcement process. But there's now some guidance in the law about what is required in order to do these sorts of things. So if we were to get a complaint, we couldn't really just say, well, we can't do anything. Now we can take a look at the situation and investigate. And if it violates one of those individual provisions in law, the board would have the authority to take disciplinary action. In other words, if the board, if a practitioner was, you know, from another state and was just, you know, doing an internet thing, writing letters for people in California, California has jurisdiction over that particular provision, and so that would be unlicensed practice. If somebody out of state was doing that, not meeting clients. If a in-state licensee was providing these letters and just saying, "Oh, pay me $300 and I'll provide you a letter, no questions asked," well, then there's a clear violation. Whereas before, you know, we could take action, but there was really nothing. It have to fall under gross misconduct. We would have a section in law to cite, well, you didn't have an established client relationship with that person for 30 days. You know, you didn't see them. And so becomes a little bit more clear cut for enforcement of what to do. You didn't complete a clinical evaluation. And as you can see from the psychology board and the BBS example that I provided, those things pretty much essentially happen, but there's really no guidance in the law for licensees of what that looks like for them to do. So I think from our enforcement unit's perspective, I think that would be helpful for when we get those complaints. We would still have to have evidence that happened, you know, in order to move forward with a case. But it provides things a little more clear cut. The bill also, you know, sometimes we get cases where, you know, it's just, well, somebody is doing this, but there's no evidence if we can't take action, the bill also points to a jurisdictions like the Attorney General or the, I think it was the state or the city attorney. We could point them, try contacting these individuals to discuss your case then. Steve, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Honestly, you explained it perfectly. I think right now it just really helps us define that more. Instead of just doing unprofessional conduct, we can actually point to a specific language that will assist us. So it really does help to clarify. We have, had cases like this before, and we used unprofessional conduct, but to kind of really hone in and have that language, it would really help.
I know Kelly raised his hands. So
yeah, I was about to,
go, and then I follow him.
Okay. Kelly.
Hi, Ms. Brosman. This is Kelly Renner-Singer. I'm one of the board members. I actually was one of the people who initially stated my opposition to the bill. And honestly, I agree with basically almost all of it. One of my concerns was the idea that inside the bill, you have to create this sort of month of therapeutic relationship. And the idea is that the practitioner really would have a pre-existing therapeutic relationship prior to providing this letter. My big concern is there is a population of people that use emotional support animals that simply don't have the privilege or power to have that ongoing therapeutic relationship. There are people who are transient, people who are homeless, people who live in rural communities, who simply don't have the means to establish ongoing therapeutic relationships, but still have a need for emotional support animals. Almost everything that you said, I agree with, and I completely agree with the idea. Under California law, an assault upon a service dog is an assault upon the person, and that is absolutely right. But I guess my concern with the bill is that it would curtail the ability of that population of people who need emotional support animals but don't necessarily have the ability to establish ongoing therapeutic relationships to get ESAs. Could you comment on that?
Absolutely. And I definitely hear what you're saying. I think the confusion that you may be thinking of is that when we talk about an emotional support animal, we're talking about an animal that is permitted into places that are not normally allowing pets. Typically, it's apartments. It used to be on airplanes. And those places can actually require these letters. So what you end up having are really sort of three options. One is that you don't have a letter and you hope for the best. Two, you establish care. It can be telemedicine, telehealth, whatever it is, free community clinic that is establishing sort of some mental health care. Or three, you go through and have a continuum of care, which is, of course, ideal. However, the important point here is distinguishing the rights of emotional support animals between the rights of pets, because anyone can have a pet. And someone who is transient or experiencing homelessness, having that pet, I understand is a huge lifesaver for them, but they technically aren't an emotional support animal because they don't have the rights that come from having that letter. So I think it's prudent to recognize that people with mental health conditions who benefit from the presence of a dog may still not need that designation as an emotional support animal unless they are trying to bring that animal into a place where pet dogs are not permitted. Does that make sense? Does that answer any?
Sort of. So under the Fair Employment and Housing Act, emotional support animals are allowed inside apartments where they typically would not be. So in the situation where, for instance, you have someone who's transient and transitioning into public housing, like Section 8, he would need an ESA letter. So wouldn't the inability to form that clinical therapeutic relationship, which is required inside the bill, impede his access to getting an ESA? And getting a service animal would be just completely out of reach for this person.
I understand what you're saying now, and I hear your point. I also did someone speak up? I'm sorry.
Well, it's Rabia. Can I jump in for a second here to help answer that question?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Obviously, as with any regulation or law, the devil is always in the details, and this is one of those details. If we take the question that you just posed with the Fair Housing Act and the fact that that does provide somebody the right to have an emotional support animal in housing. What's the difference between that then and you having a relationship with that person for clinical care, for ongoing clinical care? If that person has a housing that you just mentioned, for example, the likelihood is there is a relationship with you as a clinician. If that person does have behavioral therapy needs, so wouldn't that fulfill your need? I mean, what?
Well, no, because the bill is requiring a 30-day prior clinical. The bill is requiring a 30-day prior therapeutic relationship and a clinical evaluation.
Okay, so I go back to saying then again. I mean, then if you flip that around, then I can't just come to you today and say I need a letter to have housing. Could you sign this piece of paper for me? If you don't do that clinical evaluation, how are you going to know that I actually am legitimately in need of that emotional support animal?
Hold on.
And completely don't. I totally don't disagree with that. I absolutely 100% agree that they need to do a clinical evaluation.
That's our concern. That's really where things have been becoming a bigger and bigger crisis, because I can right now go online and basically sight unseen get a letter from a professional for $200 or $20. I'm not sure how much of that goes to that professional, to be honest with you. These are businesses, and that's all it takes. And it's a growing problem. It is really an out of control problem, and we need to figure out a way to manage it.
Yeah, totally don't disagree with you.
Hold on. I know. Thank you both. I just want to make sure that we don't go back and forth. I know we have Christina Wong next. So we're trying to create some order, and then we have Ross.
So thank you so much. So I want to, just echo the fact that this is a huge problem. And it is not just about what the law, it is being misused. And so I think the fact is that, this is, so you got, the kind of the confusion, of the service animal job versus, the emotional support animal job. And they have been, confused by different industry and causing a lot of a problem, to our, disabled community. And so I think the cleanup, definitely, it's very, very needed. And so I want to, respond to, to Kelly's question, so, now in reality, I work with the county that deal with the people who are homeless, who have the lowest income, it's the under, it's the people, who have the least, resources and income available. And so, so how do they access, therapy wise? That is not an issue. I can tell you, it's the middle class people like us that always have problems in accessing healthcare, not the poor. So I just have to say it out there. And so, as a licensed therapist, as a person who worked in the county, also as a person who wrote a letter before, to support, the person's housing, I can tell you right here what this bill would do, is actually, set a really clear parameter, for the licensees, to really help, the people to basically now the emotional support animal. And Kelly, you're right on. It is just for the Fair Housing Act. It is really the purpose for housing, not for them to go into the public. And so, so basically, so what the clinician can do, it's really to set the parameters, what they need to do in order to prescribe a letter so that these people can have the benefits. So the bottom line is that, that I personally think that, that this is really important to put it in place, so that, there's guidance, and there are also therapists out there not misusing this as a money earning opportunity. Because when it's called emotional support dog, you're pinpointing to something that, that emotionally related, issues that the person has to deal with. And so truly, if you don't go through the proper assessment, have an established relationship, there's why you would just give a person, that, write a letter, so I think it's so important, to me, this is also very close to my heart, because I have seen, I can also tell you, I have seen clients misuse this, that kind of like utilize the clinician, to kind of like get their needs met. So I think we have the responsibility, to know, what we needed to do in order to prescribe a letter, and so that we can also, protect, the public, and actually, it's so funny that, that Dr. Ru, just actually, sent me a little message and then telling me that there's actually funding, for the people who experience trauma to get therapy. Also, many local agencies provide free therapy, just, like the county agency, like I do. And then the safety of the disabled community must take precedence before these animals can go into certain places. So I am totally in agreement with her. And so, so I really, want to, I think for us, as the Board of Behavioral Sciences, the part that belongs to us, it's really about like monitoring, the clinician, to be able to, just, like I say, set some parameters so that they know that, these are the steps, that they needed to do. This is what it takes for them to, to write a letter, to support the emotional support dog. So there's a lot of different aspects, but I think this is the little part that we can do, apart, in this bill. So I'm in support with that. I think last time, unfortunately, I was the only one who supported that. And I encourage my colleague, to also, to really seriously consider, supporting this bill as well. Thank you.
Okay, Christina, thank you. We have Ross, and after Ross, I would like to open to our public because I know we have stakeholders representing our licensee that perhaps might have would like to say something. So, Ross, you're next.
Thank you very much. I wanted to sort of reiterate everything that my fellow board members have said about my, desire to help support legislation that further protects the uses of service dogs as opposed to emotional support dogs. I know there's two questions I have. One would be my concern about any sort of public space limitation on emotional support animals that might come from this legislation. For example, not being able to bring them like on airplanes, public housing, hotels, things of that nature. Now, I understand the incidents that you, Ms. Brosnan, have talked about regarding public space incidents with animals that are not trained on animals that have been trained. But my concern would be that this then might prohibit those who have service animals who, don't have any incidents, never had any history of any violent incidents, prohibit them from bringing their animals, let's say if they're traveling or going to. So how might that affect, this legislation might affect their ability to bring their emotional support animals into those places?
Ross, thank you for those questions. To clarify one piece here, emotional support animals have been barred from traveling on airplanes since the beginning of this year. And there aren't public locations that emotional support dogs are allowed. And I want to say very, very clearly that emotional support dogs are playing a very important role with their handlers. And it's not an us against them situation where I'm saying protect my service dog and, who cares about the emotional support animal? It's about trying to set everyone up for success in a way that is safe and accommodating to both parties and the public itself. So again, an emotional support dog doesn't have the training, the 2 years of training that my service dog has to be comfortable at a concert or somewhere where there's loud noises, other animals, those types of things. It's actually a disservice to the emotional support animal to bring them into those places because they don't have any prior experience with this. And we think about mental health professionals, you wouldn't, throw someone into the middle of something that was super overwhelming and out of their comfort zone and expect that they would be fine. So again, I don't see that this is going to impact people with service dogs because we are trying to really separate out the difference between an emotional support animal and a service animal. And I don't see it affecting emotional support animals because the way that the laws currently are written only permit them in housing and not in places of public accommodation.
Okay. Okay. Then the other issue is, I don't know if it's really so much as like a question, but to sort of reiterate what board member Renasinki was talking about was, there are certain elements established in this legislation that a healthcare practitioner would need to satisfy to provide this. And that the 30-day client-provider relationship is something that I take a little bit of hesitation with for the reasons that my fellow board member had pointed out. I do believe that the other separate element about completing a clinical evaluation of the individual is something that's totally reasonable, something that I would insist upon it, and I think that can be something that helps prevent these providers who you just pay them $200 and they give you a letter. I mean, they would actually need to have done a clinical evaluation. I do think the 30-day relationship, again, for people that are low income, transients, living in rural communities, that I think maybe is an additional element that might not be fair to those persons who might find it hard or difficult or nearly impossible to have a 30-day existing relationship.
I hear.
I add just one thing here for a resource, Wallace, just briefly about that. There is a clinician by the name of Jeffrey Youngren, Younggren, all one word, Jeffrey Youngren, at University of New Mexico, who has done some work on how to provide guidelines for professionals in behavioral sciences with recommending emotional support animal, what that means and how to go about it in some kind of structured way. So that may be something that would be helpful for this board to tap into, since somebody else has already been doing some thinking about it.
Okay. I'm sorry, Christine, I really would like to go out if it's okay with you, because again, we have stakeholders that might want to chime in the conversation. And then if there are other board members in the way back, we can definitely, speak again. So moderator, if you could please open to the public.
May I make one clarifying statement about the 30 days?
Sure.
I appreciate it. I just want to ensure that we're clear that the 30-day period just means that they have had a clinical evaluation within the past 30 days. It's not, it's not required to be, every day or every week. It's you've done a clinical evaluation within 30 days, determining that this emotional support animal is required. So just clarifying that.
Well, it does say at least 30 days. So to me, that means there has to be a 30-day period before that person can provide a certificate, not just that I've had an exam or an evaluation within 30 days.
Right. Ross, please, we need to go out and then we'll come back so we avoid. I appreciate it. Trying to clarify so the public can understand. Again, moderator, can we please open to the public again? If there are any comments?
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to make a comment, please click on that Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to our panelists. You may also utilize the hand raise feature by clicking on the hand icon that appears next to your name. Our first comment comes from Leah Brew. Leah, I've sent you a request to unmute your microphone.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Leah Brew, LPCC, also a counselor educator. You all should know that I've had students that we've dealt with and also associates who have written letters not knowing that they weren't supposed to do this, without any sort of policy, without any training in how to do this. People just write letters, and that's hugely problematic, even with an ongoing client. And it was helpful to understand that maybe we need to modify the language a little bit about within 30 days. But I really think that the clinician should have a relationship, and a single 1-hour session is not adequate to do a full assessment of whether or not somebody needs emotional support dog, because that comes with a lot of privileges. Honestly, I think that dog should have training, but maybe that's outside of this. I would rather, I have a lot of students who have dogs because they're blind or in a wheelchair, and to think that those people, those folks lose any ability to move around for equity compared to other people is problematic. There is lots of funding to get free therapy in this state, and now people can do it electronically. It doesn't have to be done in person. So there is no reason, if somebody legitimately needs an emotional support animal, that they shouldn't be able to do that. And they do need, as a clinician, 1 hour is not adequate time to do an appropriate assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brew. Any other comments from the public, moderator?
Not seeing any other requests at this time. Would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
It is closed.
So in coming back to us as a board member, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through and see if there were any other comments. Christina Wong.
So yes, thank you, Max. So I just want to clarify that, to Ross' question, the 30 days, establish a relationship, to a lot of the services, it's really not that long. And so I want to just echo what Dr. Bruce said, that, this is, 30 days is actually a fairly decent time. And on the other hand, to answer, Ross's question about, the homeless people, I have a lot of the homeless people that, they have long-term established relationship with us, and they can still, are they able to get access, to the service. So I do not see that, the 30 days from the clinical point of view and from the service provider point of view, it's a huge obstacle.
Okay, I know that at a certain point we'll have to agree to disagree, and that's okay too. Kelly, before you go in, I just would like to share something, because I'm in support of this bill. Actually, I would like to make a motion to support the bill, and I'll put it on the floor. I think, though, the only thing I disagree, Christina, with some other my colleagues, I believe the disparities out there are huge for people who have access to mental health, because I know we all come from different experiences, but depends if you're, in a city, if you live remotely, there are major disparity for people to approach to some mental health period. But because this board has advocated to bridge and reduce those disparities. So to me, though, this bill doesn't do that, because the way the things are right now, we are harming an important part of our populations. The fact that there is no clarity, the fact that, like Dr. Brew just spoke about, how even associates, there are no rules. I mean, it's really free fall for anyone. Anyone can write anything they want, and it's not regulated. It's a money business money enterprise. So we definitely had to help to stop that. The disparities, I don't think, to be honest, is the responsibility of the community that's advocating for the service dogs protections to reduce those disparities. I don't think it's their responsibility, because unfortunately disparities come from major health disparities that go also beyond mental health, as we all know. So I don't think it's fair for us to put the burden of the disparities on the community when they're trying to protect themselves from the harm. Of course, we need to look about anything we do, how it's going to affect other communities. But I think at this point, we can allow unregulated therapeutical services to go through where people benefit from it in one way or another. And by the way, speaking about disparities, this letter costs money. People usually call up and pay, $100, $200, $300. So and people that can do that are cut out of the process too. So I think we can definitely move forward and do better. I'm sure any law is not perfect, but here the intent is to recognize that there is major harm done to a portion of our community that's really has been struggling for years to do advocacy in that regard. So I think we can help to clarify at least the responsibility of our clinicians, and then move forward to do better. And then I finish on the 30 days relationship. I see it as a relationship. It's not 30 days of clinical services. It's not 30 days of therapy. It's the moment you make point of contact with therapeutical services to engage into a need that's obviously there. So I made a motion on the floor to support the bill. Okay. Who seconds? I'm sorry.
Me, Christina.
Oh, Christina, sorry. Are there any conversation about the motion on the floor before we go to vote? I don't see anyone. Please forgive me if I miss you. Feel free to jump in. If Kelly, I apologize. I know you raised the hands before I started talking. It was anything else? You're good. Okay. Then at this point, I will call for a vote. Roseanne, am I correct? Roseanne? I think
yes, the motion on the floor is support. You can call for a vote.
Wonderful. Thank you, Roseanne. Christina, if you can help us with the call. Thank you so much.
Okay. Deborah Brown?
Yes.
Yvette Casares Willis?
Yes.
Max Desposi?
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich?
Yes.
Susan Friedman?
Yes.
Diana Herwick?
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe?
No.
Wendy Strack?
Yes.
Christina Wong?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again to our guests for coming today. We really appreciate your advocacy and speaking and helping us understand a little bit better. So thank you for being here again. You're more than welcome to stay if you wish, but we need to move forward to our next item in the agenda.
I'd just like to second that thank you to Rabia and Wallace and Isaiah King from Assemblymember Freeman's office for taking the time today out of their day to provide a little bit more information and background about this. So thank you.
Yes, thank you both. So if I am correct now, we are resuming the agenda from item 12, which is again, Roseanne, right? From the Telehealth Committee update?
Yes. Yes. So let me flip to that page. Okay. So just an update on the board's ongoing telehealth committee. The telehealth committee met yesterday. The telehealth committee has a number of topics related to telehealth that it's going to examine. Right now, it's examining the law regarding associates and trainees' use of telehealth and making some clarifications there, and also supervision via video conferencing. And so the board staff conducted a survey of 4 different populations. We surveyed associates, we surveyed students, we surveyed school programs, and we surveyed supervisors. So we discussed the results of that survey yesterday and then where to go from there. So a big thank you to our professional associations for helping out in designing and distributing the survey, and also to Shelley Jones and the Solid team for doing an amazing job helping us compile all of the numerous responses that we were successful in getting. Thank you to everybody there. And so based on that discussion yesterday, the Telehealth Committee is going to meet again on October 1st, and we are going to discuss, move forward with discussing a couple of different options. We're going to draft a couple of different options of law regarding supervision via video conferencing, and we're going to discuss that a little bit further. So that is where the Telehealth Committee is at.
Thank you, Roseanne. Do we open for questions? I believe we usually do that, right? Yes.
I believe so.
Yes, our fellow board members. Any questions about the reports and any observations, questions? Moderator, if you can open outside to see if there are any questions from the public. Thank you.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to make a comment on this item, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to our panelists. Alternatively, you can also utilize that hand raise feature. First comment comes from Leah Brew. Leah, I've sent you a request to unmute your microphone.
Oh, I typed in the question. Thanks. Hi. Counselor Educator, Leah Brew. Just a quick question. As I was reading through this, I got a little bit nervous. Are we going to be needing to demonstrate how we're teaching telehealth and telesupervision in our programs now, along with the 50,000 other things we proved? Was that an intention that may come around in the discussion?
I think, Leah, your question is there going to be discussion on a coursework requirement?
Yeah.
Yeah. There has been discussion on that. We'll be bringing that question back to the October 1st meeting for continued discussion. The thought that's on the table right now, which may or may not change, is it would look kind of like the suicide assessment requirement, where it's a one-time requirement, and if it was already covered in coursework, the school would attest to that. So that's what's going to be discussed further.
Thank you.
And not seeing any other requests for comment, would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, thank you, moderator. Thank you. Okay, Rosanna, I don't believe there are any other questions from the board. So we can move to item 13, licensing committee updates.
For sure, yes. So the licensing committee held its last meeting on June 25th of this year. The board formed the licensing committee in order to conduct an in-depth discussion about several topics related to the licensing process. And so during the last meeting, staff provided the committee with an overview of the current licensing process, and then the committee also discussed and made a recommendation regarding eliminating the 12-hour California Law and Ethics course for renewing registrants who had failed the Law and Ethics exam. Right now, all associates who fail the L&E exam and want to renew their registration then have to take a 12-hour California Law and Ethics course. So the committee recommended deleting that requirement. Instead, a new requirement would be in its place to require a 3-hour California Law and Ethics course for all registrants each renewal cycle. So that was considered. That's the proposal on the table right now. It was considered by the Policy and Advocacy Committee, and it will be considered by the board today. So it will be I believe, our next agenda item. And then the next meeting of the licensing committee is going to be October 15th.
Thank you, Rosanna, again. Any questions from the board? And again, I believe in the next item, agenda item, also we are able to go a little bit more in the merit of it. Okay, moderator, if we can open comments from the public, thank you.
This is the moderator. We've again opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to comment, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to our panelists. You may also utilize the hand raise feature.
Thank you, moderator.
Not seeing any requests, I will close the panel.
Wonderful. Thank you again. Back to our board. I don't see any comments on questions. Roseanne, I think at this point we can move to item 14, which you're also leading from the Policy and Advocacy Committee recommendation.
Roseanne, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So this item, ultimately what it proposes is a continuing education requirement for registrants. So what it proposes doing is replacing the 12-hour California Law and Ethics course requirement for renewing registrants who fail the L&E exam with a CE course for all registrants. So a little bit of an overview, as I alluded to, the board requires all of its registrants to take the California Law and Ethics exam a minimum of once each renewal period until that exam is passed. If the registrant fails the California Law and Ethics exam, they can still renew their registration, but during that next renewal cycle, in order to take the exam again, they need to take a 12-hour California Law and Ethics course to move forward. And then a registration can go on to be renewed up to 5 times, and after the 5th renewal, the applicant can obtain a subsequent registration number, but they must have passed the California Law and Ethics exam by then. And so this discussion started at the licensing committee as an item because the staff had observed that since the examination restructure was put in place about 5 years ago now, at times completion of the 12-hour L&E course has been the source of some confusion or problems for registrants. It causes some confusion, specifically about the timing of the course and the fact that you can renew your registration, but then to take the exam again, it can be confusing to people when they need to do that. And so it becomes problematic and can sometimes cause a delay in the registration being renewed. So after considering all of the above issues, the licensing committee directed staff to draft language to delete the 12-hour California Law and Ethics course requirement for those individuals, and to instead require all registrants to complete a 3-hour California Law and Ethics course in each renewal cycle. So attachment A shows the proposed language if the board were to require this. And right now you're seeing statute only. If the statute was successful, we would need to update our regulations as well. But this is kind of step 1 for now. This statute changes is needed first to make any change. And so in terms of the Policy and Advocacy Committee, the Policy and Advocacy Committee discussed this proposal at its August 6th meeting, and 2 noteworthy discussions occurred at that meeting regarding this topic. In addition to discussing the actual proposed language, the committee discussed whether or not the language would need a delayed implementation. The committee decided that with proper advance outreach, delayed implementation would not be necessary because there would be a little bit of lead time and also because of the length of the course. So that's what the committee concluded. And also cost concerns were discussed. Some stakeholders had some questions about whether the 3-hour course would place a cost burden on associates. And so after that meeting, I looked into the CE costs a little further. We had provided we kind of have a general idea that we provided about some of the bigger CE courses and what those cost. For example, we know that for the 6-hour California Law and Ethics course that licensees are usually required to take, there's all kinds of course ranges. You can find that course online or in person. The range from $36 to $145. There's just a variety of them and lots of different costs. There were some CE providers that I found that offer some 3-hour L&E courses with covering specific topics related to law and ethics. So of course, none of them are designed as a 3-hour course for associates because that requirement doesn't exist right now. But for some 3-hour law and ethics courses that looked to me like it would kind of cover, specific topics related to law and ethics, I found costs from about $21 for the course to $39. So that's an idea of some of the costs that might be encountered. A couple of stakeholders also reached out to me to indicate that certain CE providers, as well as some employers, would offer or could offer free law and ethics and CE courses as well if the requirement were to go into effect. And in fact, some already do apparently, and I did find evidence of that. So the recommendation today is to discuss the proposal and decide if the board wants to pursue this as legislation.
Thank you, Roseanne. Any members of the board would like to speak to this?
Again. So if you don't mind me talking again.
No, I know you're shy, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm so shy. I'm so sorry. So I think this is, I want to just, talk a little bit, about, just that confusion, to the staff. At the very beginning, when we were redesigning, the examination restructure, it's seemingly like a really good idea, about like, oh, you pass and then you don't pass and you take a, law and ethics exam, and yet, I think the real big part is just like, the idea is great. The implementation is just absolutely chaotic. And so, so when the idea, came, that just required them for every renewal period, I think the most important thing is very consistent with the practice, for the current licensees. So the current licensees take 6 units, for every renewal period, and their every renewal period is, biannually, right? So, every other year, so and I think that's, that is a really important thing, also for the associates to learn is how to practice, lawfully and ethically. And so, so this is, exactly the reason why, it recommended, for the 3 units, for the every renewal period. And that will be very consistent with down the road, when a person get licensed, that they have to be reminded, about the law and ethics and to learn about the new laws and the changes. So, so it's actually, I would really, suggest that, the board members to approve it. And I think it will be definitely beneficial, for the associates and also, the staff to just make things, really consistent and clear. That's my little spiel.
Okay, Christina, thank you. Any other comments from the board? I do not see any. Operator. If we can please open to the public. Thank you, moderator.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to comment on this item, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to our panelists. You may also utilize the hand raise feature. Our first comment comes from Rebecca Gonzalez. Rebecca, I've sent a request to unmute your microphone. And as a reminder, everyone will have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California chapter. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to comment on this issue. And I think my comments will probably mirror what I believe I said in committee, which is even though the courses, there are some reasonably priced courses, our concern with costs really has to do with the fact that it's coupled with the recent fee increases, which were, as you know, pretty steep. And so I do think that our members are concerned and sensitive to any extra costs. And also, I think it's unfortunate that, I mean, there's always going to be confusion when we keep on changing requirements, and there's a rub there, but mainly our concern is about the cost coupled with the fee increases. Thank you.
Rebecca, can I ask something? I'm sorry, this is Max.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So it was a neutral position. I mean, is I missed that part, so I don't know if you are taking a position in favor or against, or there is no position other than the
It is opposition because of the concern coupled with the cost concern coupled with the recent fee increase.
Thank you for clarifying that. I missed it. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, moderator.
Thank you. Our next comment comes from Ben Caldwell. Ben, I've sent a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. Good morning. Ben Caldwell, MFT. I appreciate the work of the board and staff on this issue. I think it would amount to a meaningful simplification that also serves a good public protection purpose. Because as it is right now, if someone passes their law and ethics exam on the first try, they might be practicing for 4 or 5 years more beyond that as an associate. And while we hope that they keep up with changes in law and changes in ethics codes, there's really no way for the board to ensure that at this point. And so this would be a much simpler requirement. Certainly, I'm sensitive to the issue that Rebecca raised about cost, especially in light of the fee increases. That being said, I work for Simple Practice Learning as it is right now. We have a couple of 1-hour ethics CE courses that are available at no cost on our platform. And I think that we, as well as the professional associations and employers, would all have a vested interest in ensuring that associates can get this newly required course at minimal cost. So I think there would be a sort of community effort in making sure that that burden is minimized for associates if this were to be put into effect. So again, thank you to board and staff. Would encourage this to be moved forward.
Thank you. And our next comment comes from Jennifer Alley. Jennifer, I've sent a request to unmute your microphone.
Hello, this is Jennifer Alley with CAMP, the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. And, I'm kind of a tweener where we're concerned. Like, I want to echo the concerns about, additional requirements going on to associates and any new costs aligned with those new requirements. But we do at the same time appreciate the clarity and consistency with having the regular trainings as opposed to going 4 to 5 years without any update on law and ethics as statute does change. And it is consistent with, what licensed individuals are required to do. But I did have to, I appreciate that Mr. Caldwell, organization has free training available. That's very helpful. But again, we always do have any concerns with new costs for our members. So thank you.
Thank you. And our next comment comes from Leah Brew. Leah, I sent a request to unmute your microphone.
I want to echo how important this is to do this. I remember we once had an associate that we looked at with the board who had been pre-licensed for something like 17 years. It's quite frightening to think that they never had a law and ethics class for that long. I know we're looking at possibly changing that capacity, but just as an FYI, I offer a free course to my students every year. It's a 3-hour course. The problem is it's pretty redundant except for whatever updates have changed with the BBS in the previous year. But I don't see with Zoom, I could at least take 200 people for free. And then if I needed to charge enough to just pay for whatever it costs to run a web page, I could easily, I'm sure it could be like $10 a person. So there's a way to do this. You build it and they will come. So I'm totally in support of this.
Dr. Brew, may I say, I would be concerned about making proposals like that. You might end up having 3,000 students all at once, but good for you. We appreciate your efforts. So thank you for sharing.
Sure. If I do that, I'll charge $5 a piece and make a lot of money. Thanks.
Thank you.
And not seeing any other requests for, Leah, I think did you mean to lower your hand? There you go. Thank you. Not seeing any other requests. Would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, thank you. Thank you,
It
moderator.
is closed.
So
Okay.
I like to make a motion. I like to make
Okay.
a motion to direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and to pursue as a legislative proposal.
Thank you, Christina Wong. Anyone that would like to second the motion? I see Wendy Strack seconding. Oh, no, sorry. Did you second or you wanted to say something? Sorry, Wendy.
Oh, no, I wanted to second. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So for the record, we have Christina Wong and Wendy Strack seconding the motion. Any other comments? Okay, then Christina Kitamura, we can go and call the vote. Thank you.
Deborah Brown,
Yes.
Yvette Casares Willis,
Yes.
Max Desposi,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Diana Herwick,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
Wendy Strack.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Wendy.
Yes.
And Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Christina. So we're moving now to item 15, Roseanne. Am I right? Yes.
Yes. Item 15 is AB 107. The author is Assemblymember Salas. The topic is licensure and veterans and military spouses, and the board's previous position on this bill was opposed unless amended. The bill is now enrolled, meaning it's on the governor's desk awaiting a decision by him. And so this bill proposes requiring all boards under DCA to issue temporary licenses to military spouses if they meet certain specified requirements. And the bill has a delayed implementation to begin on to become effective on July 1, 2023. So existing law does a lot of different things to accommodate and encourage the licensure of military spouses. Certain boards are already required to issue temporary licenses to military spouses if they meet certain criteria. That is the Board of Registered Nursing, Vet Med Board, and the Medical Board. And then other boards, including this board, don't have a temporary license requirement right now, but are required to expedite the initial licensing process for an applicant who is honorably discharged for the military or a military spouse under certain conditions. The board also has just recently implemented a streamlined licensure by credential process for our LMFT, LCSW, and LPCC applicants, where anybody, not necessarily a military spouse, but anybody who's licensed in the state can obtain a streamlined licensure process if they meet certain conditions. So in terms of this bill, all boards will be required to issue a temporary license to practice a profession or vocation to an applicant after appropriate investigation if they meet certain specified requirements. So they would need to be married or in a domestic partnership or a legal union with an active duty member of the U.S. Armed Forces assigned to active duty in the state. That person must hold a current active and unrestricted license to practice the profession within the same scope, and that's a new modification since we last talked, within the same scope in another state or territory of the U.S. They would need to submit an application to the board and a signed affidavit attesting that they meet all the requirements for a temporary license and can include written verification from their licensing jurisdiction. They can't have committed any acts that would be a grounds for a suspension or denial or revocation under our law here in California, and can't have been disciplined or have an unresolved complaint out there in their state. They would need to provide fingerprints to the board, and then they would need to pass a California law and ethics exam. And then DCA would be required to, the DCA board would be required to conduct an investigation of the applicant, including a criminal background check, and to issue a temporary license within 30 days of receiving the documentation. The temporary license must be immediately terminated if it finds the license holder failed to meet any of the requirements I discussed above or provided substantially inaccurate information. It now require the board to revoke a temporary license after notice and opportunity to be heard if it finds a temporary license holder engaged in unprofessional conduct. And that is a new amendment to the bill since the board last talked. And then also, it requires that a temporary license is non-renewable. That's another new amendment, and expires 12 months after issuance or upon issuance of or denial of an expedited license. So that's another new amendment that was recently. So the author is basically just trying to really streamline and make easier the licensing process for military spouses, because it's really a big problem for them when they have to move to another state or jurisdiction and they practice a licensed profession, and then they have to all of a sudden face hurdles in getting licensure. In terms of how that would affect this board, the board doesn't currently have a temporary license status. We do have the license by credential process that the board put in. It came into effect in 2020. That it was really a streamlined process for all out-of-state applicants. It's working really well, and coupled with that streamlined process, if a military spouse came in under the licensure by credential, if they've been licensed at least 2 years, board is already required to expedite a license for a military spouse. There are some concerns that staff has that this really kind of bypasses some of the important steps in the licensure process. If for somebody that's not licensed, somebody that's licensed 2 years, they're going to have, fairly. The board's kind of already decided that there's a streamlined process for those applicants. If the person was not licensed 2 years, it kind of misses some requirements that would ordinarily the licensing unit would check. We would check to see if the licensing requirements in the other state were equivalent to California and what was missing. We would require a passage of a clinical exam. We would make sure that the applicant's degree is from an accredited or approved educational institution so that they would ultimately qualify for licensure, because you have to be from an accredited or approved institution. It still doesn't say anything about that. There's also some concerns about continuity of care that staff has discussed with the board, and the board had some concerns as well. This therapy is usually for a longer term time, and there's no requirement in the bill that the therapists disclose that they're on a temporary license. So there could be some issues with continuity of care if things were not to work out. Adding a new license would increase staff workload and may create some breeze change, would create some breeze changes, not may. So there would be some new workload and fiscal there. We get between about 11 and 20 of these applicants a year, so it's not a huge workload. It just, anytime you create a new license type or status, there is a separate workload and process involved with that. In terms of our license portability streamlined option, as I said, I think that for that to qualify for that process, you have to have been licensed in your other state for at least 2 years. You also have to, before you can get that credential license by credential, you have to take some specific California specific coursework that the board has decided is very important to public protection. There is a specific California law and ethics course you have to take, a California cultures course, and a California child abuse and assessment and reporting course. So that coursework, which can be taken easily online, wouldn't be required for the temporary license, but they would have been required to pass the California law and ethics exam. So there's it leaves the coursework out, although the law and ethics requirement for the exam passage is there. In terms of previous board positions and discussion with the author's office regarding this bill, the board in its May meeting took an oppose unless amended position, citing concerns because of California's uniquely diverse environment, that the coursework that I referred to, it's California specific. The board felt that that's essential. And so that was the board asked to be removed from the provisions of the bill. The board considered the amended version of the bill again on its July meeting, decided to leave its oppose unless amended position in place. And then the bill has been amended again since the July 7th meeting. but the board has not been removed from the provisions of the bill as requested. I did reach out to the author's office and had a lengthy discussion with them after the July board meeting, explaining the reasoning behind some of the board's concerns. We talked about the potential implementation issues about whether the applicant may qualify for a temporary license but would not qualify for a regular license due to maybe a non-accredited degree or lack of required practicum. There was some language that was added that, you know, if an expedited license was denied ultimately, the temporary license would expire. But it would cause us to issue a temporary license, and then when we evaluated the application later, it would get revoked if they didn't, you know, say have all the coursework. It would also kind of create a weird situation if somebody needed to register as an associate to gain hours. So another thing we talked about with the author's office is continuity of care and possibly client notification that it was a temporary license. And then, of course, the California law and ethics and California cultures and California child abuse. And the author expressed a willingness to consider those issues, but ultimately there were not any really, except for the things that I discussed and what the bill does and some of the changes. There wasn't anything really specifically added to address those concerns. And so the bill is now enrolled. It's at the governor. It can't be changed anymore. So what you see is what you get. And so with that, I will open it up for discussion.
Well, Roseanne, as always, thank you so much for really helping us through the pro and cons in terms of, you know, the history of the law and the bill. So thank you so much for collecting that. Any considerations and questions from the board? I'm trying to look at you all. Perhaps, Christine, I'm totally going to throw you under the bus since we are both in a P&A. Would you like to perhaps share our concerns that we expressed even before? Or I don't mean, unless you change your mind or so. Yes.
I think Roseanne did such a good job in summarizing our concern, you know, and so maybe my question is that, you know, so to Roseanne is now, you know, the board has not been taken out of it. And, you know, so what will be, you know, so what are the outcomes that we're looking for? Are we looking for just basically amended, you know, our position? Or
it's just considering the amendments, the current version of the bill as amended on September 2nd was the date of the last amendment. So that it wouldn't really make sense to take a if amended or less amended position anymore, because there's no more amendments are possible. So I think that you're considering what's in front of you now. Your choices are either support, neutral, or oppose.
Right. So we need a new position. Okay. You know, so yeah, so the under the bus, Christina say that we probably should just, you know, strict oppose it, you know, because of the you know, it's really compromising, you know, our you know, integrity, you know, of our licensing process, you know, and so, you know, I mean, my back might have a lot of arrows, but you know, but reality is like, I think it's important that we as a licensing agency that you know, for those, you know, people who come to, you know, our you know, come to California, you know, that they are not just about, you know, they're actually be prepared and competent, you know, to practice, you know, and you know, and sometimes, you know, I don't know how long they stay, you know, if, you know, they will be able to continuously to stay in California, that's great. But, you know, but we're the professional that it really takes time, you know, to work with the clients. And so, you know, so the temporary license, you know, just really doesn't fly well with me, you know, and so, you know, even though the fingerprinting and everything is there, you know, I'm still concerned, you know, exactly, you know, what Roseanne was talking about. So, you know, that's my take. Max, back to you.
Thank you, Christina. I
Looks
would like to
Callie-
add.
Looks like Callie has comments.
Thank you. Thanks for pointing it out, Kelly.
No, I appreciate the sentiments of the bill, and I have the utmost respect for veterans, and portability is very important, particularly for moving military families, but it just doesn't work. We're mental health is practiced very differently throughout the United States, with very distinct requirements in California that are set up for public protection. So, I agree with Christina.
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, also, since I'm part of PNA, I just want to add, for the sake of the public understanding, because I can see sometimes, the struggle of military spouses that moving around the country try to put to work their skills, right, in a state like California, so they can actually, save lives and support. But the problem is that a lot of folks don't understand that in the clinical work that we do in California, it's not just the bureaucratic requirements, but really the preparations for the population that we serve. It's incredibly diverse compared to other states where other licensee operates. I can bring few examples. What is considered child abuse in California is not equitable to any of the other states in the rest of the US. For instance, we're talking about experiences of trans youth that have been supported here in California that are going to be completely disregarded and missed in other states just because the law doesn't require it. So we have an incredibly diverse population that has particular voice and representations, and it's not little. We're talking about millions of people that obviously had the right to access to qualified mental health care that really provides the answers that California requires them to provide in regards to their therapeutical services and what, the ethics behind it. So I feel very uncomfortable, even though, like Kelly said, very sympathetic about the bill. Definitely there is an intent of putting people back to work. But if we open an exceptions for populations, that's definitely important. We have incredible marginalized populations in California that also struggle to get a license or having access to. And I feel like it will open the door to any other possible exceptions, which I don't see that to be fair. So I'm in a position of the bill. I think abstaining for the bill or becoming neutral after we've done the work, it seems a little bit not right, because we propose our amendments and some have been heard, others not. And I think it will be better if we take a position, whatever that is, opposing, supporting. I'm personally opposing to the bill. Are there any other comments from the board? Otherwise, I would like to open to the public.
Susan has a.
Thank you. Thank you. Susan, sorry for missing you. Hey, Susan, you're muted if you're.
Sorry, I'm just curious if we know, for example, if veterans or veterans' families, if the person usually just deals with other people in the veterans community and doesn't spread out beyond the veteran community that they are a part of. I mean, this is what I'm thinking, is that they probably, I hate to say this, they may give help to people even if we don't give them a license. I mean, I don't know that at all. And I'm just asking, do we know whether these people normally just operate within their own community?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Like Oceanside or Port Hueneme
No.
or.
Go ahead. You can go ahead next.
I just want to make sure it's clear, because I know, Susan, that's not your intent. It's illegal to practice in California without a license, no matter which community you're part of. I just want to, I know you didn't mean. Right. I don't.
But and I don't think that they would ever do anything deliberately illegal. But if someone knew that somebody was a therapist before and they needed help, they might just call them and say whatever.
Susan, there is not a metrics, a measure for us to say that. I just don't want to send the wrong message. I know that's not your intent, so forgive me, but it has to be clear for anyone that's not licensed in California. They are not able to practice, no matter how many years of license they have in any other states, or how qualified they are. So this is not what we're looking into it. It's more about a bill that will expedite temporarily a process license and leaves open some of the possible loops in qualifications, including, different classes that need to be taken, licensures. So what you're bringing up, I just feel the need to clarify it, because I want to make sure it doesn't create the confusion that people might think that this is something that if people do whatever they want to do, it's illegal in California to practice without a license, no matter what community you're coming from or what is your experience, unless you go through the process of getting your license. So how many people might be here without a license that they're practicing? We really don't have a measure to say that, Susan. But I don't know if you want to add anything else. I just want to make sure that it's not creating the confusion of that.
No, I'm totally aware of that. I was just curious if we knew whether these people normally, when they are licensed by us, do stay practicing within their community.
I don't think we can answer that, to be honest.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to answer that, honestly.
Right. Any other comments from the board? Okay, moderator, if we can open the floor to the public, thank you.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to comment on this item, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text box, and submit that to our panelists, or you may also utilize the raised hand feature. Our first comment comes from Stephanie. Stephanie, you may unmute your microphone. Stephanie, I see you're unmuted. We're unable to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Hi, everyone. I think my question was answered. It says, please reach out to Steve. So I'm just curious because the only thing actually that matches with what we're discussing now is that I am a military spouse. But yeah, I think I'll reach out to him because I just need to know like the process of my application and how it's going.
Thank you. And not seeing any other requests for comment at this time. Would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, thank you, moderator. Thank you.
It's closed.
Thank you again. So we're back on the floor. Is there any motion or anyone is moving a motion to approve or not the bill? Okay, I'll make a motion to not to approve the bill. And
Excuse me, sorry. I believe we already had a motion from Christina. Was that right? Was that your motion?
I can make that motion, sure.
I just want to, I mean, I'm not asking if you want to make that motion. I would just, for my records, I'm trying to be clear.
My apology if I missed it. So thank you, Christina, for the heads up.
Fine.
So Christina Wong is moving a motion, and what the motion is, Christina Wong?
It's to oppose the bill.
Okay, thank you, Christina. I'll second the motion. Any discussion? Okay, Christina Kitamura, if you don't mind to call the vote for us, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deborah Brown.
I'm in favor of Christina's motion.
Okay, that would be a yes, thank you. Yvette Casares Willis.
Yes.
Max Desposti.
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich.
Yes.
Susan Friedman.
No.
Diana Herwick.
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe.
Yes.
Wendy Strack.
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Christina. And perhaps we should take a small break. I was planning not to have a lunch break since we have some work to do, but I think within an hour we should be able to resolve this. So I don't want to, I'm just reading the crowd here, but what about 10 minutes break and then we come back and we finish what we have in the agenda? Is that okay, folks? So it's 12:15 now. Let's reconvene at 12:25. I think the 12:25. Thank you so much. Hey everyone, we're resuming our public portion of the Board of Behavioral Sciences. Today is September 10th. The time is 12:28. My name is Max Disposi, pronounced same is. I'm the board chair of the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and we are resuming our board agenda items for today. I believe Roseanne was leading the conversation. The next item will be item 17. Am I right, Roseanne?
The next item is item 17. That's the continuing education regulations, and that's Christy's going to be leading that discussion.
Christy. Wonderful. Christy,
Yes.
thank you and welcome. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Good. So we are here considering some additional text changes to our proposed regulations for continuing education and some of the additional training requirements that are required prior to licensure. The proposed text originally was approved by the board in November 2019. We had some delays in terms of staff workload, and also in the DCA legal department, we had a changeover of our reg attorneys, and we had a whole other level of review. So it's been quite delayed, but we're making good progress. What the changes are proposing is updating some content requirements and kind of streamlining some things in the additional training courses that people need to take to get licensed. We're going to repeal some old regulations that are no longer necessary. There were some transitional regulations, so it's just some cleanup. We would be adding, allowing a licensee to earn CE for completing a board occupational analysis survey, so an incentive there. We would limit the hours that could be earned by teaching CE, and then amend the requirements to qualify for a CE waiver. And that's for people in situations where they have a medical issue or a caregiver. And then just some other minor technical changes. So again, those were approved by the board. And then we have some, after now that it's been through the different attorneys at DCA Legal in the initial review process. So it hasn't been gone out to the public yet for the formal comment period. So this is prior to all of that. So they have proposed quite a few modifications. Most are not significant, but I detailed them out pretty well here because one of the things that the reg unit is having us do is be more detailed in our descriptions. So it kind of starts to help here. But I'm just going to go over the more significant changes here. So, you know, some of it are things like just a little bit of clarifications of things that we already do, but the language isn't very clear. But I want to point your attention to number 3 in this memo for section 1887.2 pertaining to continuing education waivers. One of the things that our attorneys recommended adding is that when somebody is a caregiver for a family member who is totally disabled, that in that situation, if they're asking for a waiver, we ask for information about the family member's illness, but the attorney said, we need you to have that family member sign a written authorization for release of their protected health information, which makes perfect sense. So we are adding that waiver language. And this is one situation where we actually have forms that are incorporated by reference into our regulation package. So when this gets publicized, you'll see the actual forms that people use to request a waiver. Let's see here. And here's some more clarifying language. I guess another thing to point out here is on item number 4 for section 1887.3. Down on that fourth bullet, we want to clarify that. So one of the things we're proposing is that licensees can get continuing education for certain activities that are not necessarily a CE course. And so one of them is that if a licensee participates in a professional organization's law and ethics review committee, they get credit for that. But it doesn't say mental health professional organization. So that's something that we wanted to add there. It's the mental health professional language there. Then they also asked us to specify the types of documentation of completion necessary for these new activities that are going to be allowed for CE, and also to specify how long you've got to keep those records. So we're saying 2 years, just like if you took a regular CE class. Then the CE waiver application forms, we just made quite a few little tweaks to that. And again, we're adding that authorization to release and just some really technical changes. And let's see here. I'm trying to see if there's anything really significant. I don't think so. Yeah, that's really it. But I do want to talk about one of something that came up during the review on the in looking at the text pertaining to the providers of training that are required for certain classes that are required prior to licensure. And this is, most people are getting these courses through their degree program, so most are not taking these, but these are ones that kind of started out as you got to have this prior to licensure. And then when we amended the educational requirements for a degree, we added them in, but you always have this crossover because when people might have, you have people who maybe started that in, 10 years ago, but you've got people applying now who got their degree 20 years ago. So, that's a never ending thing. So we have to keep these sections in there. So that being said, of the applicants who don't have these requirements in their degree, of course, the vast majority are going to take a course from a board accepted continuing education provider. However, when you look at these sections, they all list a little bit of different, where can you take it? So it's not like some of them say licensed health facilities, or some of them say governmental agencies, and then it gets a little more specific. And we want to, first of all, we want to make them consistent, but our question is that we would like to get your input on is here. Should we condense this into board accepted CE providers? Is there a point in including licensed health facilities and government agencies? And then if we leave government agencies on there, do we need to be specific to say a Department of Health or mental health? So we had originally proposed removing the licensed health facilities because a lot of these places are already a board accepted CE provider. So it's kind of the question about, should a licensed health facility be listed as a provider of these courses? And should government agencies be listed as a provider? And if so, should we be more specific that it's a Department of Health or mental health? And in that, if we were to leave those, that would mean if you're not registered, if you're not a CE provider, but you are one of these things that people could take and submit those courses from you. The little bit of complication that this leaves is it's a little harder for staff. We're used to saying, yes, you can take these courses from a CE provider, but when we have to get into, if you're taking this class, you can take it here. But if you're taking this class, you can take it here. So it gets a little bit convoluted. But anyway, so that's what we would like a little input on in making that decision and maybe some direction in that language.
Thank you so much for that, Christy. Thank you.
Sure.
I know there is a lot to it. So, okay, I'm scrolling through to see if there are any questions or consideration from our board. Kelly, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
I mean, this is just my thought, but I know that there are some clinicians who might be employed by sheriffs or, local corrections. And so you may want to think about not limiting it to healthcare mental health organizations. I'm totally cool with including government agencies because I know that Specifically in like, smaller communities, we do have a lot of therapists attached to law enforcement.
Thank you, Kelly, for that. I don't know if, Chrissy, do you want to reply to that or any need to do so? Or?
I don't think so. I'm just was trying to get some feedback on what people think about, whether government agencies should remain. We're proposing to delete the licensed health facility. So is anybody opposed to deleting that? And then I guess that would be the way to ask it. Is anybody opposed to deleting the licensed health facilities? And again, the board originally approved that, but I'm not sure how much we detailed that out when presenting it. It was in the language presented, but so is anybody opposed to that being deleted? And then the second question would be, is anybody or how do you feel about the government agencies remaining on the list, and if so, should we be more specific? So Kelly, appreciate that feedback about government agencies kind of generically to remain on that list. So I'd like to hear if anybody else has feedback.
Thank you again.
So can I speak? So it means that, licensed health facilities, will refer to, say, like Maxis, has its own nonprofit, so and it's licensed. So Maxis, agency provide a class, then that will not be accepted. If that is taken out, right? Yes. Okay. I see. Christy, are you thinking, or
it would be? You said it would be accepted if that was taken out. Would not be accepted.
Well, okay. Actually, you're right. Will not be accepted. Okay. And I'm actually okay with that.
Thanks for that example, Christina. We know that there are a lot of nonprofit providers that provide education that usually are seeking to educate, but also provide CEU, so that people can actually have access to certain kind of education they wouldn't have before, just because certain spaces and agencies are providing that specializations, right, and access to it. So definitely that reflects what we would like to do in terms of making sure that there is access to our underserved community, and in particular understanding about the diversity of our population, so more agency can come into the conversation when it comes to the CEUs. I know we have a lot of I'm not cutting the conversation for the board, but I know we have agency also on as audience. I wonder if there is any inputs that we can collect from them as well. So, and then we can come back to the board if it's okay with you all.
Yeah, works
okay.
For me.
Thank you. Moderator, if we can open to the public in case there are any comments or suggestions.
Thank you. We've opened the Q&A panel. You can utilize the Q&A panel or the hand raise feature if you'd like to make a comment. To utilize that Q&A panel, click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field that pops up, and submit that to our panelists. Comment comes from, okay, a comment that will come after this item.
Okay.
Yep, and that's it for now. I'll close the panel.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you. Okay. So any clarifications? Christina Wong.
So, so I was one of those old, people, who worked on the, that continuing education changes many, many years ago. And so, so I think we worked pretty hard, trying to, have the change the system, so that we can have the board accepted CE providers, and that kind of stuff. So, so my thought is that, if we open up, too much exception, that kind of also compromise, the whole reasoning behind that, why there's going to be like, board accept the CE providers and the approval agency, that kind of stuff. So my inclination is, intent to, more stay with, the same line, So it's not looking at just what classes that can be accepted, but really, that we want to make sure that, those classes are, that somebody, have, some agency has some oversight. And so, so my thinking is that, that it would be, I would rather to be a little bit more tightened, that stay with, the approval agency and the board accepted CE provider, instead of widening up. So that's just my thought.
But I believe, okay, I was just a clarification of procedurals. So we don't necessarily have to vote on this today. Am I correct, Christy? Or
So I would like to get a vote so that we can get this notice to the public, just because this has been hanging out, it's been around for quite a while. So if we left it as it is, we are not going to include licensed health facilities. But most of those, I think, are already CE providers, and they can become one if they aren't already, but they wouldn't necessarily want to, because it's such a tiny portion of people who are having to go out and take these. So right now that's not there. So the one that's remaining that's not in line with our current requirements for CE is a course sponsored, offered, or approved by a professional association or a state, county, or local department of health or mental health. So I'm sorry, the professional association piece would stay, but is not in question. It's the state, county, or local department of health or mental health. So that's in section 1810.5, subsection B4. So if we left it as it was today, that's what it would say. It would include the specific types of government agencies that are departments of health or mental health. But again, the question came up, should we just be consistent, not just for ease of staff? Like I said, it does get confusing, and it is confusing for applicants a little bit too, because they might think if they take this for this class that they can do that for CE.
right.
So honestly, from a staff perspective, consistency is always helpful. And again, it's such a small percentage of people taking these. And I think most they automatically go to CE anyway, or, go to a school that is an approved school.
Christy, to make that point, staff confusion also reflects the confusion, could reflect the confusion out there, because sometimes we have people taking classes in places that actually are not authorized to give out CEUs, and they mistakenly thinking that they are covered because they did so. And there's always been so definitely we don't want to add to the confusion. It's already out there. And risk that our licensee will lose the opportunity within the time frame that they need to do their CUs, because there is added confusion to who is the provider, where they can go to do it or not. So I'm all about simplifying. So considering that, are there any other comments, or perhaps a motion on the floor that it's in support or in opposition, or neither, for the bill? Christine, I know you mentioned something before, so I don't want to, I don't know if you were moving a motion or not.
Okay, so I think in that sense, Christy, are you, if we, have clarification, I mean, for where we stand right now, do you know what the language is going to be?
Yeah, so would you like me to give you a motion that would include that change to remove the government entities?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So it would be, and Sabina, correct me, I'm going to make this attempt. Or Sabina, would you like to jump in and do this?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So we do have a great motion in your memo. Is that what you're talking about, the motion, or are you talking about the different language?
The motion that would include that change to the different language. So we have approved the proposed text, maybe as modified.
As modified, remove, and then just notate what you're removing or you're adding in right there after those words, and then you can just read the rest. It's on page 5 of the memo, or I'm happy to read it.
I think I can go ahead and do that. So it would be approve the proposed text with the modification to section 1810.5 subsection B4 to remove state and local agencies as providers of the continuing education courses. And I'm sorry, let's try that again. State, local, or county departments of health or mental health. That would remove that. And I just really screwed that up. Let me try that again. Approve the proposed text as modified in section 1810.5 subsection B4 to remove the state. Get back to here. I'm scrolling back and forth.
Christy, could you just say strike subsection 4?
Well, do we need that professional association in there? That's why I'm.
Aren't most of those included in our CE approvals?
I believe so. So I think that could come out as well. So I'll just include deleting subsection B4 in that motion. And then if anybody is opposed to it, they can do that. So approve the proposed text as modified in section 1810.5 to strike subsection B4 and initiate a 45-day public comment period. Additionally, if no adverse comments are received during the public comment period, or if any adverse comments received are irrelevant to the regulation text, delegate to the executive officer the authority to make any technical or non-substantive changes that may be required in completing the rulemaking file.
Okay, that's my motion. Fine.
I'll second it.
Okay, before we go to the vote, I see that there is an attempt from our public to make a comment. Perhaps we can go back just to reopen since we have a motion on the floor. Moderator, can you please open to the floor?
Sabina, wait, who was the second?
Evie.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you. We've again opened the Q&A panel, and our comment comes from Leah Brew. Leah, I've sent the request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, sorry to interrupt this process. So it wasn't about this. I have a question. It's not about the portion we just discussed, and I didn't want to interrupt that process. This is item 4 within this same section, 1887.3, item, the second bullet point D, that says the same course may not be claimed more than once per license type. And then the same course may be counted toward more than one license held by the licensee if it applies to both scopes of practices. So my question is, can the licensee justify it? So my logic is I have a program where we prepare LMFTs and LPCCs. And while a lot of our students get both licenses, they didn't get the special marriage and family treatment designation for the LPCC because they were working under their MFT, but they may be taking, say, a course in working with couples that actually works toward both licenses. Even the LPCC who doesn't treat couples can benefit, say, from a couples course. So I guess I'm worried about how the staff justifies, no, that doesn't fit both scopes.
Actually, that's not really what it's doing here. And the only, I mean, it's so, I'm not even sure. It would only be in a CE audit. And even then, I mean, I can't, it's so hard to imagine that there would be a question on that because the scopes of practice are not radically different in any way, other than that, and even if, you know, with the marriage and family therapy, that, I mean, that does become part of the scope of practice for LPCC. But really, just to clarify, what this is doing is just saying, we're adding language saying a licensee may not claim the same course more than once per license type during a single renewal period for hours of CE credit. So all we're doing is saying, if you take the exact same course twice, and I don't know where this came from or why, but there's some situation where this was happening during the same renewal period, you can't double count that. You can't count that course. If you took the exact same law and ethics course twice, you can't claim it for, you know, you can only claim it one time. What I was talking about in the cover memo was just kind of saying, you know, we already have this where you can't, you know, you can't count a course if it's, you know, you can count a course towards both licenses that applies to both scopes of practice. So, but what the language is doing is just some a clarification. That's not really related to that. And I'm trying to think of why I mentioned this in the cover memo. Let me read this really quick. Yeah, I think I just added that to the memo just to kind of clarify of what we were trying to do here. And it wasn't that we were trying to modify which licenses you could apply it to. It's just about double counting a course for any license.
And Christy, I'd add, I think the reason for D is I think it was for a course that was several semester units so that it, you know, didn't count for all of the CE just by taking one course.
That may have been the situation.
That's what I think that was aimed at.
Okay.
Seeing no other requests, would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So back to the board. I know we have a motion on the floor. And are there any other discussions on the motion? Kelly.
So if we remove the language in D4, right, the state, county, local Department of Health or mental health, you know, assuming you're on a tribal reservation or in Trinity County or, you know, in Imperial County or anywhere in northern part of California, which doesn't have, you know, which may not have regional and national institutions accredited by the U.S. Department of Education or a BPP, because, you know, those communities may have community colleges and that's all they have. They don't have, you know, graduate mental health departments. That person would then have to go either take the course online or go to a department that is outside of that community to get his training courses under that subsection. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't believe so, because it's a community college may be an approved provider under if they're accredited, or although it might need to, I think it might, I'm not sure. Let me look back at the language.
Okay.
But they can take it on.
That answers my question.
I mean, they can take it online. And any CE they get in their future, they will have to take it through an approved provider. So, and again, it's just these handful.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments on the motion? Great. Then I would like to call a vote. Christina, please. I don't know if Christina, you can hear us. So
Christina was having some
Yeah, she's having
difficulties.
She was, and it doesn't show that she currently has an audio connection.
Okay, I can take a vote then.
Yeah, Steve.
Thank you,
Let me
Steve.
go through here. Hopefully I can do this okay. So we're taking a vote on the motion. Let me start. I'm just going to go down the line here. Christina Wong.
Yes.
And Deborah Brown.
Yes.
Diana Herwick.
Yes.
Thank you. Kelly Ranasinghe.
Yes.
Thank you. Max Sposti.
Yes.
Thank you. Ross Ehrlich.
Yes.
Thank you. Susan Friedman. Okay. And Wendy Strack.
Yes.
Pat Willis.
Yes.
Great. Motion passes. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve. Like you're not wearing many hats already. Okay, so we're moving now to the next item. I believe that's item is an update on board sponsors and monitor legislations. Is it back to you, Roseanne, or?
Yes, it is.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you again, Christy.
So today is the last day of this year's legislative session. So what that means is that all the bills that are currently going through the legislature either need to make it to the governor's desk for a decision by today, or they're not going to be decided on this year. So we have several bills to report on the status on. I have some really good news for our bills that the board is sponsoring. AB 690, that is our practice setting definition bill. That bill became enrolled yesterday, as did SB 801, which is our sunset bill. That bill also serves as our board's omnibus bill, and CAMP has rolled their bill up into SB 801 as well to modernize and clarify the LMFT scope of practice. That bill has become enrolled as of yesterday as well. Also enrolled and on the governor's desk is CalPIC's bill, AB 462. That bill deletes the requirement that LPCCs gain at least 150 hours of clinical experience in a hospital community mental health setting, and the requirement that they complete additional education and experience to treat couples and families. So the board supported that bill. It is now enrolled and on the governor's desk. And so the governor has until October 10th to make a decision on whether he's going to sign it or not. So stay tuned for that. And then let's see, a couple of other bills that we considered today that status has changed. Everything else, the status in here is pretty much accurate, with except AB 107, which we discussed today, and retook a position. That bill is enrolled as well. I'll be sending out an updated letter. And then AB 468, the emotional support animals bill, that bill is now enrolled, and we'll be sending out an updated letter to the governor on that one as well. So that is the legislative update. Are there any questions?
No, Roseanne, thank you. Thanks for sharing the
Deborah,
good news.
Deborah has a comment.
Deborah.
Roseanne, and forgive me if you've already covered this and I wasn't paying attention. I believe it was Senate Bill 19. Where did we end up landing on that? I know we've discussed it several times.
Senate Bill 19.
It was the allowing students to take a mental health day.
That was, it's not 19. I'm not, hang on just a second.
I can't remember if it was a Senate or an Assembly. It was adding one more day that students could be absent and they could call it mental health.
I know what you're talking about. Give me just a second here to pull something up.
I think it was at our last two meetings, and then I was surprised I didn't see it this time, so I didn't know if it died.
Yeah, let me see really quick.
Perhaps what we can do, Deborah, I don't want to take more time because it's definitely not in the agenda. I mean, it's an information I also want to know, but maybe Roseanne can research it and then let us know on off the record.
I have an answer.
SB 14.
SB 14.
Yes.
That particular bill, we never got to take a position on because that was the meeting where we lost quorum, so we didn't get that far. And so let me see what the status of that is really quick.
I just want to be conscious about not opening conversation around a bill that's not on the agenda, please. So we have to be careful. So yeah.
Okay, Max, then I'll reserve for any anything to be put on the next agenda.
Wonderful. That's great. That's the way to go. Thank you so much for understanding. Okay, so are there any other questions in relation to these items that Roseanne presented us? Any concerns? Okay, I think we have to move to the public to see if there are any concerns. Moderator, please. Thank you.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A panel. You may also utilize that hand raise feature if you'd like to make a public comment. To use the Q&A feature, click on that Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to our panelists. And for the hand raise feature, you can locate that hand icon next to your name. And not seeing any requests for comment, would you like me to close the panel?
Yes, thank you, moderator. Thank you. Okay. And now we're moving back to item 19, which is the updates on board rulemaking proposals.
And that would be me.
Yes, Christy, thank you.
Thanks. No problem. So just to go over the different rulemaking packages that haven't in the past been board approved, but are in different phases of the process. So the first one is our enforcement process reg package. We had originally started this and gotten board approval, but we had to pull it back when AB 2138 came into play. What this would do is update our uniform standards and disciplinary guidelines and strengthening certain penalties, making some updates in response to some statutory changes, and then and including AB 2138, and then clarifying language that has been unclear or needs further detail. So because this was a number of years back and we had to put it on hold, some other things have come up. Staff have brought to our attention some additional changes. We also have a new manager in enforcement, and she is looking at some of this, and we're going to be meeting and discussing what additional changes we might need, and then we'll be I'm hoping we can bring it to the board in November. I don't know for sure, but that is our goal. Our supervision related requirements, regulations, we're anticipating a January 1st, 2022 effective date and there's one component or a couple components that are phased in at later dates, and it's revising some of the qualifications to become a supervisor and strengthening some of the oversight requirements, and just addressing some different situations to strengthen the supervision process. And so this is one that's been around a while too. It was held aside pending some legislation, and then it's had some changes that were identified by not only DCA attorneys, but then by OAL that were needed. So it's been back and forth, but we are again anticipating that this January it will take effect and will be, it's right now at OAL, and I'm working with that attorney on their final approval. So we're anticipating that to be fairly soon, that we'll know an answer and we can start really getting a lot of outreach going on this. There will be new forms and things like that that'll be published January 1. So we'll be doing a lot of outreach around this one. This continuing education, we had just talked about that. So now that the board has approved that language, we can go out for our public comment period, our 45 days. And then the last one is really a technical package that's also been around for a while, and we haven't been able to get to due to workload. Hoping early next year, and this has to do with exam waiting periods, professional corporations, and accrediting agencies. Again, just some technical changes there. So that's it.
Chrissy, thank you. And just as a reminder, this is not an item that goes to vote. It was just an update. So I appreciate you putting us up to date with that. Okay, we're moving now to the item number 20. And this has to do with the 2022 board meetings dates. I believe, Steve, are you presenting this or?
Yes, I am. So, and really just quick, rookie move, I even put this on the agenda, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what dates we're looking at for next year. That's simply it. We will be coming out, and when we finalize all these dates for next year, we'll be posting those to the website, and we will be letting you know. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. That's it.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much also for working in advance so that we can actually have an idea about what next year is going to look like. Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Okay, we're moving now. Actually, item 21, which is public comments for items not on the agenda. I can definitely ask my board first if there is any public comments for items on our agenda that you would like to share with the rest of us. Other than you have been here for 6 hours now.
This is the moderator. I do see that Deborah Brown has her hand raised. I'm not sure if that's left over from previously.
Thank you, moderator, for pointing that out. Deborah. No, okay, we're good to go. Okay, I appreciate that. And moderator, if we can open.
I have a quick comment.
Oh, Christina, yes, of course.
Just a quick comment. If we can meet in person in the next meeting, that would be awesome. Just saying. It's just, yeah.
I know you missed those drives from Chico to Sacramento.
Oh,
but
God,
yeah.
yes, I so missed that drive.
Thank you, Christina. Okay, let's moderator, can we open to the public to see if there are any public comments for items not on the agenda? Again, as a reminder to the public, we cannot take any positions or address the items that are going to be raised at this agenda item, but we can make the decision to place them in the next board meeting. Again, moderator, thank you.
Thank you. This is the moderator. We have opened that Q&A panel back up. If you'd like to make a comment for items that were not on today's agenda, you can utilize that feature by clicking on the Q&A icon on your screen, typing comment into the text field, and submitting that to our panelists. You may also raise your hand utilizing that hand raise feature. And our first comment comes from Jennifer Alley. Jennifer, you may unmute your microphone.
Good afternoon. This is Jennifer Alley with CAMPT, and I just wanted to see if it would be possible either in the licensing or telehealth subcommittees or even with the board to have discussions about ensuring that there is a process to have flexibility for associates and students and trainees that have disabilities and mobility issues, to make sure that there's a process in place for them to maybe submit an individual waiver that can be analyzed or reviewed by the board on a case-by-case basis. And then again, we'd also, in the next issue, we would like to have a discussion about life coaches and any consumer protections that may be necessary to ensure that those individuals aren't practicing behavioral health services. And I'd like to thank you for a great board meeting and thoughtful discussions today. That is all that I have.
Thank you, Rebecca, as always. Thank you. Moderator.
Yep, Rebecca Gonzalez is next. Rebecca, you may unmute your microphone.
Thank you. Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California Chapter. I just want to second Jennifer's first comment about having a process for people with mobility issues. We have received some correspondence from our members who do have a certain disability and want to see how to get accommodations. Thank you very much.
And not seeing any other requests, would you like me to close the panel?
I think we can close. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It is closed.
Wonderful. So I think we can move to item 22, suggestions for future agenda items. So this is for our board. Any suggestions? Kelly, and then
Chair, I'd ask that we place on the future agenda discussion point on mobility issues and also regulations regarding life coaches.
Regarding, sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Regulations regarding life coaches.
Thank you, Kelly.
Well, that's it.
And then I know that Deborah has also a suggestion.
Yeah, I'd just like an update on that bill, the 14. that I inappropriately asked about earlier?
Yes, wonderful. That's great.
Just
Perhaps, Deborah, if it's okay, also we can reach out to our P&A and also Roseanne directly, and that we can find out even sooner than the next board meeting, I'm sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any others? Susan, I see you. Yes.
I would like it if we could discuss some suggestions the board may have that we could in some way communicate how to help therapists who deal with children, excuse my hoarse voice, and also the elderly who had a very difficult time with technology. Not all the elderly, but some elderly had a difficult time with technology during the pandemic, because we do know that telehealth is going to be with us forever. So I think we should be ahead of the curve and think about ways in which we can make suggestions or ideas that we have for dealing with little children, not children who are older, the elderly. And of
Thank you,
course,
Susan. Oh, sorry, Susan, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were finishing the sentence?
say, and of course, the severely mentally ill.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Also, as a reminder to the public, we do have a telehealth committee also that is addressing the issue of telehealth. And so that's also a great forum and opportunity for anyone, the board members and the public of the members, to join and work with the rest of the team to see the future in telehealth and the possibility, the challenges, and so forth. So thank you, everyone. I don't believe there is anyone else making any suggestions for future items in the agenda. If that's the case, this is the time to adjourn the meeting, which is item 23. So it's been a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you so much for being here. And we are adjourning the meeting at 1:15 p.m. on September 10. And we will see you all at the next board meeting Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks for your patience.
Bye.
Thank you, Max.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.